London, 1875. The gaslight flickered across the silk-papered walls of Lady Harrington's drawing room, casting elongated shadows over the assembled members of London's high society. The gentle hum of string instruments competed with the tinkling of crystal and the swelling murmur of gossip. At the center of it all stood Miss Juliet Sinclair, her chestnut hair swept into an elaborate arrangement of curls and adorned with modest pearl pins, the only jewelry her diminished circumstances allowed. "Do avoid the east corner, my dear," Lady Pembroke whispered, her gloved hand lightly touching Juliet's elbow. "The Duke of Grantham has taken up his usual post there. Such a pity about his condition." Juliet's gaze drifted toward the shadowed alcove where a tall figure stood in solitude. Even from a distance, the Duke cut an imposing figure, broad-shouldered and rigid in his perfectly tailored evening attire. His handsome features might have been carved from marble, so still and expressionless was his countenance. "His condition, Lady Pembroke?" Juliet inquired, though she had heard the whispers since arriving in London 3 weeks prior. "Why, the man hasn't uttered a single word in society for nearly 5 years. Not since the tragedy. Some say he cannot speak at all anymore. Others claim he has simply chosen silence." Lady Pembroke's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of sharing such delicious gossip. "Either way, he attends these functions like a spectre, watching, listening, but never participating." Lady Pembroke drifted away to greet a countess, leaving Juliet alone with her thoughts. 5 years of silence seemed an unfathomable burden. What tragedy could render a man mute? The Duke of Grantham, Gideon Ormsby, remained an enigma even to those who had known him all his life. Juliet had come to London with one purpose, to secure a position as a music tutor to a family of means. Her father's death had left the Sinclair women destitute, their modest country home in Hampshire sold to pay his gambling debts. Her mother now resided with a disapproving sister in Bath, while Juliet had journeyed to the capital with nothing but her exceptional voice, her skill at the pianoforte, and letters of recommendation from her former instructors. Lady Harrington, a distant connection of her mother's, had graciously offered Juliet a temporary place in her home and entree into society, not as a debutante seeking a husband, but as an oddity of sorts, the genteel young lady fallen on hard times, whose musical talents might entertain guests while she sought employment. "Miss Sinclair," Lady Harrington's voice cut through Juliet's reverie. "We would be delighted if you might favor us with a song." Juliet curtsied gracefully, masking her discomfort. These performances, while necessary to showcase her abilities to potential employers, felt increasingly like exhibitions of a curious specimen. Nevertheless, she made her way to the pianoforte, adjusted her modest sage green gown, and placed her fingers upon the keys. She began with a simple prelude, allowing her fingers to reacquaint themselves with the instrument. Then, drawing a deep breath, she sang. Juliet had chosen Schubert's Ave Maria, a piece that showcased both the clarity and range of her soprano voice. As the first pure notes filled the room, conversation ceased. The final strains of the violinists faded as they too stopped to listen. Juliet lost herself in the music, closing her eyes against the stares of the assembled nobility. When she opened them again, she found herself looking directly into the intense gaze of the Duke of Grantham, who had moved from his shadowed corner to stand at the edge of the gathering. His eyes, a startling blue-gray, were fixed upon her with an expression she could not decipher. When the final note died away, the room erupted in applause. Juliet rose, cheeks flushed, and curtsied deeply. As she straightened, she noticed that the Duke had vanished. "Magnificent, my dear," Lady Harrington declared. "I believe you've impressed everyone tonight. Lady Essex has inquired about your availability to instruct her daughters." Juliet smiled, relieved at the prospect of employment, yet oddly disappointed that the mysterious Duke had departed without a word, though what else could she have expected from a man renowned for his silence? 3 days later, Juliet sat in Lady Harrington's morning room, penning a response to Lady Essex's formal offer of employment. The terms were modest but acceptable, room and board plus a small stipend in exchange for daily music instruction for 3 young ladies. She would begin the following Monday. The butler appeared at the doorway. "Miss Sinclair, you have a visitor." "For me?" Juliet set down her pen, puzzled. She had made few acquaintances during her brief time in London. Yes, miss. The Duke of Grantham requests a moment of your time. Juliet nearly upset her inkwell. The Duke? Are you certain he asked for me? Indeed, miss. He presented his card personally. The butler's expression betrayed nothing, but Juliet detected a note of curiosity in his voice. He awaits in the blue drawing room. Heart pounding inexplicably, Juliet checked her appearance in the small mirror above the writing desk. Her day dress of navy blue muslin was plain but presentable, her hair simply arranged. It would have to suffice, one did not keep a duke waiting while one changed attire. She found him standing by the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light. He turned at her entrance, and Juliet was struck again by his imposing presence. The Duke of Grantham was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair swept back from a high forehead and features that might have appeared severe were it not for the unexpected warmth in his eyes, the same penetrating blue-grey that had locked with hers during her performance. Juliet curtsied. Your Grace, this is an unexpected honor. The Duke bowed in return but, predictably, said nothing. Instead, he extended an envelope toward her. Uncertain, Juliet accepted it. May I? At his nod, she broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet within. The handwriting was bold and masculine, * Miss Sinclair, ***, your performance 3 nights past has remained with me. I find myself in need of a music tutor for my ward, Lady Charlotte Ormsby, age 12. The position offers accommodations at Grantham House, a generous annual salary, and the use of my late mother's Broadwood grand pianoforte. ***, should you find this arrangement agreeable, you may take up residence immediately. If not, I shall understand and wish you well in your endeavors. ***, Gideon Ormsby, Duke of Grantham. Juliet read the note twice before looking up. Your Grace, I am deeply honored by your offer, but I must inform you that I have just accepted a position with Lady Essex. The Duke's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes, disappointment, perhaps. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small notebook and pencil. After writing briefly, he tore out the page and handed it to her. I shall double whatever Lady Essex has offered. Juliet's eyes widened. That is exceedingly generous, Your Grace, but I have given my word. She hesitated, watching his impassive face. May I ask why you have chosen me? Surely there are more accomplished instructors in London. Another note, * none who sang as you did. Charlotte needs not just instruction, but inspiration. She has been withdrawn since her parents' death. * Her parents. Then she is not, * my brother's child. I became her guardian when he and his wife perished in a boating accident 5 years ago. * 5 years, the same timeframe as the Duke's silence. The connection could not be coincidental. I see, Juliet said softly. And you believe music might draw her out of her grief? He nodded, something urgent in his gaze. Your Grace, I am deeply touched by your confidence in my abilities. However, I cannot in good conscience break my commitment to Lady Essex. She drew a deep breath. Unless, perhaps an arrangement could be made? I could instruct Lady Charlotte 3 afternoons a week, after my duties with the Essex girls are complete. The Duke considered her proposal, then wrote rapidly, * acceptable, if Lady Essex agrees. I shall call upon her myself. When may you begin? * If Lady Essex consents, I could start this Friday afternoon. He nodded once, decisively, then startled her by taking her hand and bringing it briefly to his lips in a gesture of gratitude. Though no words passed between them, the warmth in his eyes conveyed his appreciation more eloquently than speech. After he departed, Juliet remained in the blue drawing room, her mind awhirl. She had just negotiated terms with one of England's most powerful and enigmatic noblemen, a man who had not spoken in 5 years, yet who had somehow communicated more in their brief exchange than many men did in hours of conversation. Grantham House stood on Berkeley Square, its imposing Portland stone facade a testament to generations of aristocratic wealth. Juliet arrived promptly at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon, clutching a portfolio of sheet music and fighting a curious nervousness that had nothing to do with meeting her new student and everything to do with seeing the Duke again. The butler, Stevens, led her through a grand entrance hall and up a sweeping staircase. His Grace has arranged for your lessons to take place in the music room adjacent to the library, he informed her. Lady Charlotte awaits you there. The music room was a light-filled chamber with tall windows overlooking the garden. At its center stood a magnificent broadwood grand pianoforte, its gleaming rosewood case and ivory keys a testament to superior craftsmanship. Seated on a chair near the window was a slender girl with fair hair and solemn eyes that marked her unmistakably as the Duke's relative. Lady Charlotte, may I present Miss Sinclair, your new music instructor, Stevens announced. The girl rose and executed a perfect curtsy, though her expression remained guarded. How do you do, Miss Sinclair? Very well, thank you, Lady Charlotte. I am delighted to make your acquaintance. Juliet smiled warmly. Your uncle speaks highly of your potential. A flicker of surprise crossed the girl's face. Uncle Gideon spoke to you. In his way, Juliet replied carefully. He has a most eloquent pen. Charlotte's shoulders relaxed fractionally. Yes, he does. Though I remember when he used to have an eloquent voice as well. She gestured toward the pianoforte. Shall we begin? I should warn you that I have had 3 instructors before you. None lasted more than a fortnight. Juliet set her portfolio on the music stand. And why is that, Lady Charlotte? The girl lifted her chin. They said I lack both talent and discipline. Uncle Gideon dismissed them all. I see. Well, I prefer to form my own opinions. Would you play something for me? Anything you like. Charlotte sat at the instrument and launched into a halting rendition of a simple Mozart sonata. Her technique was indeed unpolished, her timing erratic, but Juliet detected something promising in the girl's touch, a natural sensitivity that no amount of instruction could impart. You have a good ear, Juliet observed when Charlotte finished. Your difficulties seem to stem not from lack of ability, but from impatience. The notes are rushing ahead of your fingers. The others said I was hopeless. Then they were poor teachers indeed, Juliet replied firmly. Music is not merely about technical proficiency. It is about expression, about finding one's voice. She paused, considering her next words carefully. Sometimes, Lady Charlotte, when we cannot express ourselves in one way, we must find another. The girl's eyes, so like her uncle's, studied Juliet intently. Is that why you sing, Miss Sinclair? It is one reason, Juliet acknowledged. Shall I demonstrate what I mean? At Charlotte's nod, Juliet took her place at the pianoforte. She began with the same Mozart piece, but infused it with expression, allowing the music to breathe, to speak. Then, almost without thinking, she began to sing, adding her voice to the melody line. So absorbed was she in the music that Juliet did not notice the door opening, nor the tall figure that entered silently. Only when she reached the final cadence and looked up did she see the Duke standing just inside the threshold, his gaze fixed upon her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Charlotte had noticed him too. Uncle Gideon. Did you hear Miss Sinclair? Isn't she magnificent? The Duke nodded, his eyes never leaving Juliet's face. Do you think I might learn to play like that someday? Charlotte asked him. He crossed to his niece and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, then nodded again, the ghost of a smile softening his stern features. Miss Sinclair says I have a good ear, Charlotte continued, clearly accustomed to carrying on one-sided conversations with her silent guardian. And that my problem is impatience, not lack of ability. The Duke raised an eyebrow at Juliet, a question in his gaze. Lady Charlotte has natural sensitivity, Juliet explained. With practice and patience, I believe she will make remarkable progress. He inclined his head in gratitude, then withdrew a folded note from his waistcoat and handed it to Juliet. Asterisk, would you honor us by staying to take tea? Asterisk, thank you, Your Grace. I would be delighted. Tea was served in a charming garden room overlooking the square. Charlotte chattered happily about the music lesson, while the Duke listened attentively, occasionally writing brief notes to both his niece and Juliet. There was an ease to the interaction that surprised Juliet, as if the Duke's silence was simply another language, one his household had learned to interpret through gestures, expressions, and the occasional written word. As the lesson day drew to a close, the Duke escorted Juliet to the entrance hall himself. Before she departed, he pressed another note into her hand. You have brought music back into this house. I am in your debt. Spring yielded to summer, and Juliet's afternoons at Grantham House became the highlight of her week. Lady Charlotte proved an eager pupil once she understood that Juliet believed in her abilities. The Essex girls, while pleasant enough, lacked Charlotte's natural affinity for music and approached their lessons as merely another social accomplishment to be endured. The Duke was often present for Charlotte's lessons, sometimes working quietly at a desk in the corner of the music room, sometimes merely listening. Juliet grew accustomed to his silent presence and found herself looking forward to their wordless exchanges, a raised eyebrow that asked a question, a slight smile that conveyed approval, a nod that expressed gratitude. One particularly warm afternoon in July, Juliet arrived at Grantham House to find Charlotte flushed with excitement. "Miss Sinclair! The most wonderful thing has happened. Uncle Gideon has agreed to open the ballroom for a small musical soirée next month. I am to perform, and he wishes you to sing as well." Juliet was still absorbing this news when the Duke entered, carrying his ever-present notebook. He handed Charlotte a note, which he read aloud, "Only if Miss Sinclair agrees, and only if your practice continues to show improvement. Oh, it will, Uncle, I promise." Charlotte turned to Juliet. "Please say yes, Miss Sinclair. I've never played before an audience before." "Of course I'll help you prepare," Juliet assured her, touched by the girl's enthusiasm. "Though I'm surprised that your uncle wishes to entertain. I was given to understand that he seldom hosts social gatherings." Charlotte lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, though the Duke could clearly hear every word. "He hasn't held a single event since Papa died. This is tremendous progress, Miss Sinclair. Mrs. Harris, that's our housekeeper, says it's all you're doing." The Duke's expression remained impassive, but a faint color appeared high on his cheekbones. He scribbled in his notebook and handed the page to Charlotte with a pointed look. "Uncle says we should begin our lesson and cease gossiping about him as if he weren't present," Charlotte translated with a grin. Though he didn't use those exact words. The lesson proceeded as usual, but Juliet found herself distracted by Charlotte's revelation. Had she truly influenced the Duke to re-enter society, even in this limited fashion? And why should the thought fill her with such warmth? After Charlotte had been dismissed to her other studies, the Duke remained behind. He wrote a note and handed it to Juliet. "Would you help me plan the musical program? I am woefully out of practice as a host. I would be honored, Your Grace," Juliet replied, "though I confess I have limited experience with such events. Between us, we may muddle through. Tea in the library tomorrow after Charlotte's lesson, that would be perfect." As Juliet made her way back to the Essex household that evening, she found herself humming. The prospect of working closely with the Duke on the soirée filled her with anticipation that she dared not examine too closely. He was a duke, she was a music teacher dependent on her salary for survival. The gulf between them was unbridgeable, and even if it were not, there was the matter of his silence. What future could there be with a man who could not or would not speak? Yet she could not deny the connection between them, or a wordless understanding that transcended conventional communication. When the Duke looked at her, Juliet felt truly seen for the first time in her life. The planning sessions for the soirée became a ritual that Juliet treasured. The Duke's library was a sanctuary of leather-bound volumes and comfortable chairs, with tall windows that admitted dappled sunlight through the leaves of ancient plane trees. Over tea and small cakes, they would discuss potential musical selections, the guest list, and Charlotte's progress. The Duke communicated through his notebook, of course, but increasingly through gestures and expressions that Juliet found herself able to interpret with surprising accuracy. His wry humor emerged in the arch of an eyebrow, his concern for Charlotte in the furrow of his brow, his appreciation for music in the slight relaxation of his shoulders when Juliet sang. One afternoon, as they finalized the program, Juliet noticed the Duke gazing thoughtfully at the pianoforte that occupied one corner of the library. "Do you play, Your Grace?" she asked impulsively. He nodded, a shadow crossing his features. Would you consider playing a duet with Charlotte at the soiree? I believe she would be overjoyed. The Duke's expression closed, his jaw tightening. He shook his head once, decisively. "Forgive me," Juliet said softly. "I did not mean to distress you." He rose abruptly and crossed to the window, his back to her, shoulders tense. After a moment, he returned to the desk and wrote rapidly, the pencil pressing hard against the paper. I have not touched a keyboard since the night I learned of my brother's death. We were to perform together at a charity concert the following week. He was the musician in the family, I merely accompanied. Without him, there seemed no point. Juliet read the words with a pang of sympathy. "I understand," she said, though she longed to tell him that music could heal as well as wound, that perhaps playing again might honor his brother's memory rather than betray it. But she had overstepped once already. "Instead," she said, "Lady Charlotte has your brother's musical sensitivity. She plays not just with her fingers, but with her heart." The Duke's gaze softened. Yes. She is very like him. The evening of the soiree arrived with all the anticipation of a royal visit. Grantham House blazed with light, its ballroom transformed by fresh flowers and dozens of candles. The guest list, though modest by ton standards, included several influential musical patrons and a handful of aristocratic families with children Charlotte's age, the Duke's first attempt to provide his niece with suitable companions. Juliet wore her best gown, a deep blue silk that had belonged to her mother in more prosperous times, carefully refashioned to follow current styles. Lady Harrington had loaned her a simple pearl necklace for the occasion, and her hair was arranged in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. The musical program began with a string quartet performing Mozart, followed by Charlotte's solo performance of a Clementi sonatina. The girl played with remarkable poise, her months of dedicated practice evident in her confident execution. When she finished, the applause was genuine, and Charlotte's face glowed with pride as she curtsied to the assembled guests. Then it was Juliet's turn. She had chosen to perform two contrasting pieces, a lively folk song arrangement followed by a more demanding aria from Donizetti's Lucia di Lammermoor. As she took her place at the pianoforte, Juliet caught the Duke's eye. He stood at the edge of the gathering, resplendent in formal evening attire, his expression unreadable except for the warmth in his gaze when it met hers. Drawing a deep breath, Juliet began to play. The folk song charmed the audience, earning appreciative smiles and gentle applause. But it was the aria, with its soaring high notes and emotional depth, that transformed the room. As the final, pure tone faded, there was a moment of breathless silence before the applause erupted. Juliet rose, flushed with the success of her performance, and curtsied deeply. When she straightened, her gaze sought the Duke's, but he was no longer in his accustomed place. Scanning the room, she finally spotted him moving purposefully toward the pianoforte. The assembled guests fell silent as the Duke of Grantham took Juliet's place at the keyboard. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Many present knew that the Duke had not performed in 5 years. Without preamble, he began to play. The piece was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, hauntingly beautiful, technically demanding, and emotionally devastating. His large hands moved over the keys with surprising delicacy, drawing forth sounds of such profound feeling that several listeners dabbed at their eyes. When he finished, there was utter silence, broken finally by Charlotte's clear voice, "Uncle Gideon." "That was magnificent." The room erupted in applause. The Duke rose, acknowledged the ovation with a brief bow, then did something that caused several dowagers to reach for their smelling salts. He extended his hand to Juliet, inviting her to join him at the pianoforte. Understanding dawned as he gestured toward the sheet music for a four-handed arrangement of a Schubert piece. Juliet took her place beside him on the bench, acutely aware of his presence, the subtle scent of sandalwood, the warmth of his arm nearly touching hers, the intensity of his focus as he counted them in with a nod. They played as if they had rehearsed for months rather than sight-reading together for the first time. The Duke's playing was technically flawless, Juliet's more intuitive but equally effective. When they reached the final chord, their hands briefly overlapped, a fleeting contact that sent a current of awareness through Juliet's entire being. The applause was thunderous. Charlotte rushed forward to embrace her uncle, tears streaming down her face. You played again, she whispered, loud enough for Juliet to hear. You finally played again. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur. Guests approached to compliment both performers. Charlotte glowed with pride in her uncle's accomplishment, and refreshments were served with much animated conversation. Through it all, the Duke remained silent as always, communicating through nods, smiles, and occasional written notes. It was well past midnight when the last guest departed. Charlotte had been sent to bed an hour earlier, leaving Juliet and the Duke to bid farewell to the final carriages. As they stood in the entrance hall, an air of celebration still lingering around them, Juliet found the courage to speak what was in her heart. Your performance was extraordinary, Your Grace. Lady Charlotte was not the only one moved to tears. The Duke inclined his head in acknowledgement of the compliment, his expression softening. If I may be so bold, Juliet continued, her voice gentle, your brother would be proud. Music such as yours should not remain silent. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, perhaps, or regret. He withdrew his notebook and wrote rapidly. Walk with me in the garden? There is something I must tell you. The night garden was a haven of peace after the stimulation of the soiree. Lanterns illuminated the gravel paths, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine perfumed the air. They strolled in companionable silence until they reached a stone bench beneath an ancient oak tree. The Duke gestured for Juliet to sit, then settled beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. After a moment of hesitation, he began to write. The message was longer than usual, filling an entire page of his notebook. On the night I learned of my brother's death, I was rehearsing our duet for the charity concert. When the messenger arrived, I was at the pianoforte. I read the news and something broke inside me. I screamed until my voice gave out, literally tore my vocal cords. The doctor said they would heal in time, that I would speak again. He paused, then turned the page and continued. But when the physical ability returned, the will did not. Words seemed inadequate to express my grief, my guilt at not being with him, my fear of failing Charlotte. Silence became a refuge, then a habit, then an identity. Until you sang that night at Lady Harrington's, I had not felt moved to break it. Juliet read the words with growing understanding. And tonight? When you played? Tonight I remembered why my brother loved music so deeply. It speaks when words cannot. Just as your singing spoke to me across a crowded room and woke something I thought was dead. Juliet's heart beat rapidly. Your Grace, he raised a hand gently, asking for her patience, then wrote one more line. I find myself falling in love with you, Juliet Sinclair. A most inconvenient development, as I am still uncertain whether I shall ever speak again. The world seemed to still around them. Juliet read the words once, twice, scarcely believing what she saw. When she looked up, the vulnerability in the Duke's eyes nearly undid her. Love needs no words, she said softly. You have shown me that. We communicate more clearly in silence than many do in hours of speech. He took her hand, his expression questioning. Yes, she answered, understanding perfectly. I have fallen in love with you too, impossible as that may seem. A duke and a music teacher, what would society say? A hint of a smile touched his lips as he wrote, Society will say whatever it pleases. I stopped caring 5 years ago. And Charlotte? What would she say? That her matchmaking has succeeded admirably. Did you not suspect she contrived the soiree partly for this purpose? Juliet laughed in surprise. That cunning child. No, I had no idea. The Duke's expression grew serious again. He wrote slowly, deliberately. I cannot offer you conventional courtship with flowery declarations and romantic speeches. But I can offer you my heart, my name, and my solemn promise to cherish you all my days. Will you marry me, Juliet? Tears blurred her vision. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He drew her gently into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that spoke volumes without a single word. Their wedding 3 months later was an intimate affair, attended only by family and close friends. Charlotte served as Juliet's bridesmaid, beaming with satisfaction at the success of her scheme. Lady Harrington declared it the most romantic match of the season, while Lady Essex, who had graciously released Juliet from her position, predicted that the new Duchess of Grantham would revolutionize musical education among the aristocracy. As Juliet and Gideon stood before the altar, she in ivory silk and he in formal mourning attire, the vicar asked the traditional questions. When it came time for the groom's responses, a hush fell over the chapel. The Duke had made it known that he would indicate his answers by nodding, as was his custom. But when the moment arrived, Gideon Ormsby surprised everyone, most of all his bride. Looking directly into Juliet's eyes, he spoke for the first time in 5 years, his voice hoarse from disuse but clear enough to be heard throughout the small church. "I will." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Charlotte clasped her hands in delight, tears streaming down her face. Juliet's own eyes filled as she realized the gift her husband had given her, breaking his silence at this most significant moment. Later, at the wedding breakfast, the Duke spoke little, still more comfortable with written notes and expressive glances. But occasionally he would lean close to his new wife and murmur a few words meant for her ears alone, each phrase a precious gift that moved her more deeply than the most eloquent oration could have done. That evening, as they prepared to depart for their honeymoon at Grantham's country estate in Derbyshire, Charlotte presented them with a parting gift, a leather-bound volume of sheet music, specially commissioned for 4 hands. For when words are not enough, she explained with wisdom beyond her years. The Duke, who would gradually reclaim his voice over the coming months, though he would always remain a man of few, carefully chosen words, embraced his niece tightly. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." As their carriage pulled away from Grantham House, Juliet leaned into her husband's embrace. "Will you play with me tonight?" she asked. "Our first duet as husband and wife." Gideon smiled, the warmth in his eyes speaking volumes. "I would like that very much," he replied, his voice still rough but growing stronger. "And perhaps you will sing for me." "Always," Juliet promised, as the carriage carried them toward their future, one in which music and love would intertwine to heal old wounds and create new harmonies that would, indeed, echo through time.